We're living in the peak times of the comic book movie era. Both Marvel and DC have their own cinematic universes featuring countless interconnected films and characters. Marvel's has been a massive success, DC's might be getting better, and then there are the X-Men movies. Marvel's cinematic universe began in 2008, DC's in 2013, but the X-Men movies have been around since 2000, and they're still going. Back in March, Logan delivered a conclusion to the story of the franchise's central character, and yet the series will continue with 2019's X-Men Dark Phoenix, which will mark 20 years of the same series with the same continuity. As someone who likes movies and comics and X-Men in general, I've got a lot of thoughts about this franchise's place in 2017 and what it could or should do going forward. So let's talk about it. Okay, by the end of the 90s, comic book movies were pretty much dead, killed by Joel Schumacher's universally reviled Batman and Robin. Blade in 1998 was a hit, except that wasn't a superhero movie and most people didn't even know it was based on a comic. And then in 2000, X-Men was released, kickstarting the comic book movie craze that we're currently in the thick of. X-Men took Wolverine, Cyclops, Jean Grey, Professor X, and Magneto, and put them on the big screen, making them a critical and commercial success. It proved superhero movies could still work and that audiences wanted to see them, and before you knew it, Christopher Nolan had made a trilogy of Batman movies and an Iron Man movie grossed $1 billion. X-Men kinda changed everything. But the atmosphere was a little different back then. The general consensus was that audiences wouldn't go for anything that was too comic booky, and X-Men can get pretty comic booky. Like, there's time travel and aliens and alternate dimensions and giant robots and Mojo, who is an actual character, and everyone wears these bright, colorful costumes. Back in the early 2000s, we all thought that that wouldn't work on screen and that things needed to be more grounded to work. So that's what they did. They toned down the craziness, everyone wore black leather, and visually it looked more like a political thriller. But now in 2017, comic book movies look like this. Now look, this is not meant to be a big diss on the first couple X-Men movies. That was a different time, and I really loved them when I was in high school. But over 15 years or so, superhero movies evolved, while this series remained kinda stuck in the same style and continuity of the early 2000s. Since they're still working with the small, grounded world Bryan Singer built, so much of what's cool about X-Men in the comics gets left behind. Even though the X-Men are part of the Marvel Universe, their own mythology is so dense and complex that it's almost its own universe, and yet the movies keep sticking with the same characters repeating the same conflicts. Basically, the X-Men movies are this big, ongoing missed opportunity. And what makes it more annoying is that somehow, in less than 2 decades, X-Men movie continuity makes less sense than X-Men comic continuity, which is its own clusterfuck. They're about to do their second version of the Dark Phoenix saga. Moira McTaggart is the same age in the 60s as she is in 2006. What the hell is the timeline with Weapon X? The last 3 movies were each set a decade apart, yet no one ages. Like, Quicksilver spends 10 whole years in the same basement wearing the same clothes. It's lazy, and it's dumb, and the next one is apparently set in the 90s? Why? What's especially frustrating is that recently, Fox has been nailing it with the fringe X-Men stuff. Logan, an R-rated Western about Wolverine that was a massive departure from the rest of the series, is the best X-Men related film anyone has made. Legion is bonkers and amazing and wonderful, and Deadpool, of all things, managed a pretty much perfect translation of the style and tone of the comics. So why can't they do the same thing with the main X-Men movies? So now, to solve the problem that is the X-Men movies, I've brought in my friend Connor Goldsmith, who probably knows and cares more about X-Men than anyone else I know.
I grew up essentially speaking X-Men as my first language. Like, I have a creepily encyclopedic knowledge of like 80s X-Men. People older than me are always just like, why do you know this much about Candy Southern? And I'm like, well, you know, I just do.
If the next X-Men movie was canceled, the Dark Phoenix movie.
I love Sansa Stark, but please don't do this movie.
It doesn't seem like a good idea. And so, continuing from where we left off, with the continuity we've gotten, and with Fox clearly not wanting to do a hard reboot, even though that would be the best move.
Obviously.
These are what we've narrowed down to, like, the key things that if they implemented all of these, they could fix the X-Men series. And so the first thing is a POV character.
So the Claremont X-Men had 2 of these young girls who were like 14 and who come to join the X-Men and are sort of our point of entry. And Kitty Pryde is the most prominent one. Obviously, she first comes in Dark Phoenix Saga, actually. So it's not that they always had this, but I would say the stuff people remember most. You know, Kitty Pryde comes in and she is sort of the audience's viewpoint, and then in 88, 89, he brought in Jubilee.
And the way the movies did it, it's like they introduced Rogue as the POV, and then she immediately just led them to Wolverine.
Exactly. Like, the problem is, first of all, like you point out, almost immediately Rogue steps into the background because Wolverine is so charismatic and beautiful and Hugh Jackman-y that they're not interested anymore. But also, they made Rogue kind of a wet blanket, boring character.
Yeah.
And this isn't Anna Paquin's fault, because, like, obviously she's been very good in other things.
For a movie, like, our sort of central character that, you know, like, through the whole movie should really, like, not be Wolverine.
Right.
And,
it should be a young woman who is new to this world.
And through whose eyes we experience this world. I think we both agree a major aspect of the appeal of the X-Men over the past several decades that has been totally left out of the movies is that it's basically just a big soap opera.
The 70s X-Men under Claremont primarily, into the 80s, became such a big hit because it was about these small sort of beats between characters and their relationships with one another. I mean, the Jean Grey, Scott Summers, will they, won't they thing is as soapy as any, you know, Mulder and Scully derivative relationship on a TV show now. Dark Phoenix is the core example here. The reason that Dark Phoenix is so good is that you care about Jean Grey. Jean Grey has been the female lead of the X-Men since 1963. You can't just introduce Sansa Stark Jean Grey in X-Men Apocalypse, where she's not even really a major character.
No, not at all.
And then have the next movie be Dark Phoenix, because we don't care.
X-Men is all about, you know, long-term plotting.
Yes.
And planting seeds that will pay off later.
Dark Phoenix is 20 years into the publication history of the X-Men.
Right. The Marvel Cinematic Universe has to actually figure out a way to create that sort of soap opera storytelling feel that the X-Men movies have not at all.
Absolutely. We care about Bucky. Sebastian Stan is not in very much of that movie. But you care enough that by the time Winter Soldier rolls around, those scenes between them where Steve is so horrified at what has happened to Bucky, it works because you feel the connection.
So we buy the relationships between those characters in a way that we... Honestly, like, what character connections in the X-Men movies beyond Xavier
I was going to say
Magneto?
Xavier Magneto is the only one that they've ever done well.
And it's because they just keep coming back to it movie after movie because it's all that works.
What fans like is when the X-Men are this weird dysfunctional family that, you know, has very human problems and fights with each other and fucks each other and does all kinds of human things. And it's an ensemble cast of characters that people like.
I feel like because the X-Men movies began in the early 2000s when there weren't really other comic book movies around, they were afraid of going too comic booky and alienating the public, and so they really grounded it. We've got like black leather, everything, like, and the X-Men comics are like crazy, out there, sci-fi.
Well, even the DC movies, I mean, what Wonder Woman proved more than anything else
they
is
put
that
the
people
mascara
want,
in a movie.
it's that people want it to be fun.
And the X-Men movies have always discarded so much of the cool stuff from X-Men. The toning down of like the more out there sci-fi stuff.
Yeah.
Because, you know, like when we finally got Sentinels, they were like 10-foot tall Sentinels.
Instead of 50.
Not 50 feet tall Sentinels. But like there's no master molds building these Sentinels. There's no Savage Land with dinosaurs where they go on like field trips.
Or like in X3, when Phoenix does arise, the fact that it's just like Jean's alternate personality. And there's nothing cosmic about it. Like, you can have it be Jean who's tapping into the power cosmic. You could do that. I mean, Marvel's doing, like, the Infinity Stones are the most boring part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but no one's mad when, like, some celestial power happens. Like, you could do that. They keep going back to the 60s and 70s X-Men stories, which are smaller. Whereas, like, the most famous X-Men stories are the Claremont stories in the 80s that are things like the Dark Phoenix, for example, where they go to space, or the X-Men go to Asgard, which was a huge thing that is very memorable for the New Mutants in particular, or Inferno, where like New York is overrun with the armies of hell. You know, these are things that people remember because they're huge.
And I feel like, and in Apocalypse, when they did try to get a bit bigger, it
doesn't gel.
It felt really out of place in that world that had been built.
It feels like it's stapled on. It feels like it's like, well, we know you like the Marvel Cinematic Universe now, so here's a big CGI battle.
Right.
But it doesn't feel emotionally connected to any of the other stuff that's happening in the Fox X-Men franchise, because the Fox X-Men franchise has been so focused on like intimate, but weirdly not intimate, because you don't ever get to know anything about the characters, but like that kind of small scale thing. I'm not someone who thinks that we should put the X-Men in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. As a big X-Men fan, I think they work best when they're cordoned off.
I'm with you.
Because like when you do things like Civil War, the comics Civil War, there is a great scene where Iron Man goes to Emma Frost and she's like, we've been like genocided a lot for like 30 years, so I don't really know what you expect me to do here, but I think you guys should handle this yourselves. But the fact that they have to have that scene is because the X-Men are sort of doing their own story, and like it disrupts the X-Men story if the Avengers can show up to stop Genosha from being destroyed. So they can't do that.
Very few of like the great X-Men stories involve the rest
almost
of the Marvel
none.
So now there's the matter of mutants. So in all the movies that we've got so far, mutants have been kind of, and especially like how humanity views mutants, has been always portrayed the same way.
It's the mutant menace. It's the threat or menace thing.
Right.
From the 60s and
where
70s.
they're very underground. And
no one knows about them yet, really. Right, yeah.
Right.
Or they're just finding out and it's a big, like, moral panic.
Exactly. And I feel like it's time to move beyond that.
I would agree.
And for me, like, I think, especially going to the Grant Morrison era.
Yeah,
from the early 2000s.
I think that Morrison is maybe the only X-Men writer who ever made mutants feel like a legitimate minority subculture. To go way back to the 60s, like the original X-Men characters, if you look at them, are a set of very beautiful white teenagers from the suburbs of New York. And that's because the metaphor in the original 60s X-Men is, I mean, it was two Jewish guys writing about race, right? Sure. And their idea, when you're Jewish, which I am partly of Jewish descent myself, when you are Jewish, you're white in a visual sense, but you also have this other thing that, you know, people are racist about that's like a secret or not a secret, but when they find out, they treat you differently, etc. So that element came into it, but also it was an attempt, I mean, it was the 60s, it was an attempt to talk about black civil rights. And to do it sort of through this acceptable, more mainstream lens of having these pretty white kids talk about it. And that's honestly why the X-Men always works better when it's about Storm and Kitty Pryde, who are actually black and Jewish, as opposed to, that's why the 80s is so much more powerful a lot of the time. But to go back, you know, I think that is when he brought in the Morlocks, it was to say, well, okay, but these mutants don't have a lot at stake. Like, they could just pass if they wanted to. And the Morlocks were people who, like, have horns or scales or whatever, and they have to live in the sewer because everyone will kill them if they don't or whatever. Right. And what Morrison did was he's like, those people wouldn't live in the sewer. They would say, fuck you, and start their own thing. So you have, like, Jumbo Carnation, the mutant fashion designer, who's, like, making fashion for people with horns. When you lean into it, it's like, well, now there are all these human kids who think mutants are cool. And that's sort of a more modern way to talk about the other and to talk about difference. Because obviously black culture, while being, you know, degraded by white supremacy as inferior, is also elevated in this sense that people think it's cool and they want a piece of it and they want to appropriate it. So what Morrison did was basically make mutancy sort of iconoclastic and interesting and something that people were like intrigued by at the same time they didn't want it too close to them.
Right, and it really feels like to me like right now, like in
that's
this current
so
time,
much more current.
Yeah, like they have this great. I mean, obviously, you know, mutants have always been like some kind of metaphor, but it could be a way more potent metaphor right now.
Absolutely, I mean, they're doing this new TV show. Gifted.
Yeah.
And I love Amy Acker. She's one of my favorite TV actresses. But like the idea that they're gonna do another like, have you tried not being a mutant? Like parents and their kids
like on
show.
the run because
they're mutant, right? Whereas like if you want to tap into the current moment politically and to our generation, to like the millennials and all that, like what you want to do is tap into, you know, the anti-fascist movements that are arising in the wake of the most recent election. You want to tap into Black Lives Matter. You want to tap into gay civil rights and trans civil rights as they are now. Like those are sort of the liberal movements and progressive movements that are happening at the moment. And you know, I think that if you want mutants to feel now and not to feel like we're doing the same thing for 20 years, you did this in the first X-Men movie, that you need to lean more into the Morrison interpretation, where it's like, well, mutants are here, they're not going anywhere. People have accepted that even if they don't like it. Mm-hmm. And now mutants are building their own culture.
And now to get very, very surface level, let's talk about the aesthetics of the X-Men.
When was the last time you saw anyone cosplaying a character from the Singer Fox X-Men movies?
I was at San Diego Comic-Con this year. No one.
Zero, right?
Not a single person.
Yeah. Not a single one.
Yeah, no one is into the black leather jumpsuits, and even at the end of Apocalypse, they tried to finally update it and get a little bit comic booky. Cyclops finally has a blue and yellow costume.
Right.
But it's still these, like, chunky armor pieces that don't look good.
Jean Grey in a, like, green and gold lame Phoenix costume would look absurd. That doesn't mean that you have to put her in, like, a black leather catsuit and not do anything else. Like, there has to be a happy medium there. I actually think that the Deadpool movie is a good example of them doing it right. I mean, so much about the Deadpool movie feels like a sort of a soft reboot, course correction.
Colossus in Deadpool.
That's not the Colossus from the X-Men movies.
He's not
at all.
But he's in an X uniform.
He and Negasonic Teenage Warhead are wearing the navy and yellow classic X-Men look.
Right. And it works. It looks good.
He's not in the... But you get what I'm saying. He's in a uniform that looks like Colossus.
It's like black and red, but it's an X-Men
uniform. And she's in the very classic, this is what they put the New Mutants in when they arrived at the school kind of outfit.
Exactly.
Cable looks exactly like the comic. Domino also looks exactly like the comic. I mean, there's some racists mad that they flipped the color scheme, but I think she looks incredible.
But you look at those movies, and they found a way to really accurately translate.
It looks like the comic book.
It does, and it works in live action.
I think that's really the way to go, is that Deadpool movie. And what's weird is you can feel the possibility of building an X-Men franchise around that movie if you just ignored all the other X-Men movies.
Right, and it's like, I think if you can take the Deadpool costume and just put it on screen as like a thing that it's like, it's tangible and functional, you can make a Cyclops costume.
Absolutely. Like, quite honestly, do what the Marvel Cinematic Universe does. I mean, like, Captain America's costume in those movies is recognizably Captain America's costume. It doesn't have the scale mail, and it doesn't have the wings on the side of his head, but you paint the wings on the side of the head like a hub decal, and we get it.
Like, for me, if I took my glasses off, and so everything's a little bit blurry, it still looks like the same thing.
Like Apocalypse, for all its faults, when Olivia Munn walks out in the trailer initially in her, like, Jim Lee thong from the 90s, everyone just went, oh my god, it's Psylocke. Like, in a way that no one really felt about most of these movies.
About anything else in that series.
Because it's just like, oh wow, there it is. And that shouldn't be so hard. And similarly, like, when Jean Grey is doing psychic stuff, it should look awesome. One of the best things that Grant Morrison did when he decided that the retcons about Phoenix were stupid and he was just going to say, no, Jean is Phoenix, was when Jean starts using her telepathy too much and stuff, like, her hair kind of starts burning at the ends, or like things like just tiny visual signifiers that are so fun. And the X-Men should be about that kind of fun visual. Much as their interpretation of the Scarlet Witch's powers don't really make any sense, the Marvel movies with, like, Elizabeth Olsen, like, shooting weird red stuff all over the place, it looks great. Or like the Vision flying, or like, it looks awesome. Just make it cool. Just make it cool. This shouldn't be hard.
Yeah, it's that simple. Okay, and now something that I know you care deeply about.
Yes.
The roster for the X-Men. So what do you think is key to, like, a good X-Men roster?
Yeah, so I think you need the sort of stick-in-the-mud Boy Scout, which tends to be a Summers brother in any given incarnation. I think you need a woman who pushes things morally a little bit, and that's with Psylocke, and now it's usually Emma Frost. And to counterpoint that, because, if that was the only female character, it would be a little bit like snaky women in the garden or whatever. You also, I think Storm. I'm trying to make it an archetype, Storm's gotta be there. And you should put her in the leadership role because that's where she's most popular, and she's the most popular leader the X-Men have ever had. And just do it. Just do it.
Right.
And then I think you need someone who's like the brains of the operation, like Beast. You need like a couple comic relief characters, whether that's like Dazzler or Jubilee or someone like that.
Right.
And you need the core POV character who's a young person, preferably
your Kitty Pryde,
your Kitty
Jubilee.
Pryde, Jubilee, Angel Salvador, because at its core, it is about a school. I think that the problem that the movies have is that they picked this very, basic core cast at the beginning that was, in fact, a smart cast to pick, which is Cyclops, Jean Grey, Wolverine, Storm. That makes sense. But then when they started trying to fit other people into it, like Rogue or Iceman or whatever, it just never quite fit right.
Right.
But when the emotional heart has always been the younger, it's almost a YA.
And something to me that's always felt like another missed opportunity is that there's like a million X-Men characters.
Yes.
And so with each movie, almost like if some actor, they won't come back or whatever.
Right.
There's like, you can rotate in so many
Right.
people.
Just bring in someone else.
You can just like have new team members in a new movie.
As long as you develop them. These movies are still centered around Xavier, Magneto, and like Jennifer Lawrence Mystique.
All right, so now that we've figured out what a new X-Men movie would need to be good, there's the question of how do you even make that happen in this series with the 20 years of continuity that's been established and that already makes no sense.
Well, Days of Future Past was the best opportunity and they didn't do it. Instead, they went back in time again and now it's the 80s, but again, none of the characters line up with the timeline from the original
apparently
movies.
the new one is going to be set in the 90s.
Except
so they're all set 10 years apart.
But this is the thing, like Havoc is now like 50 and is still played by the kid from the new MacGyver.
Apocalypse left off in the 80s.
Right.
And so I think they should honestly just, instead of jumping forward to like the 90s, just jump like 30 years forward and just radically alter the stuff and soft reboot it.
Absolutely. Jump from Apocalypse to now it's 2017. Recast those young kids with adult actors as Scott and Jean and Storm.
And just people can like assume stuff happened
Yeah,
over
in the interim,
decades.
things happened. I know that they're happy that they have some of these stars. Like Sophie Turner is on Game of Thrones. That's a draw.
But also at the end of the day, it's X-Men. And the name
X-Men
alone
should be able to sell it without these
gonna
people.
bring people in.
Yes, and like what you do there is it's like just cast a new, and we all love Patrick Stewart.
But he's done.
Just cast a new British guy in his 60s as Xavier.
We'll be okay with it.
Just do it. We'll be fine. He just has to be bald and in a wheelchair. We'll get the memo.
And so, okay, I think we figured it out.
Yeah.
And honestly, just,
it's like just jump to the present, and now that the timeline has shifted from Days of Future Past, do whatever you want.
And connect it to Deadpool.
And connect it to Deadpool.
That's it.
It's so simple.
I think we did it. I think we fixed the X-Men, and at least, honestly, it's the odds are very, very, very low that any of the things that we would like to see will
whatever
happen.
happens.
So we will probably continue to be disappointed and frustrated for years to come.
But call us.
Because
we could do it real good.
We got a lot of ideas, guys. We got a lot of ideas. Anyway, Connor, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. This was a lot of fun.
I'm
happy to always talk about the X-Men for hours. I will do it forever.
Look, when X-Men come up, there's only one person I call.
Well, thank you.
Hey guys, thanks for watching, and once again, I really want to thank Connor Goldsmith for lending his expertise to this video. If you want to watch an extended version of our conversation, because we talked for a while, click the link right there. Now, this video is brought to you by Squarespace. If you want to make a website, but you're like me and don't know anything about web design or coding, but you still want it to look really good, you should check out Squarespace, because making a website there is really, really simple. They have award-winning designer templates, so it'll look great. Picking a domain name is super easy. There's 24-hour customer service, nothing to install or update, no patches. I was using it for years before they were ever sponsoring these videos, so I genuinely recommend it. For 10% off your first purchase, go to squarespace.com/Patrick. The link is in the description. Now, if you have your own thoughts about what should be done to fix the X-Men franchise, or if you think it's totally fine and we're just wrong, let us know in the comments. Now, if you want to help us make more of these videos, check out the Patreon. If you want to yell at me about X-Men, and get updates on what we're working on, because we're working on a lot of stuff, follow me on all those social media links, and I will see you next Wednesday.